Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
One chocolate cake.
That's all I need to put on all the weight that I've lost. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown, as I said, and that is Matthew.
We're in spooky season.
And before we begin, I want to say that this is our annual Halloween episode marking our 8th anniversary, so I want to say thank you to everyone who's listened to Dark Poutine, whether tuning in for the first time or sticking with the show since those early episodes. When Dark Poutine began on October 31st, 2017, there was no way to predict the twists, roster changes, thank you, Matthew, and rough spots we'd hit, let alone a global pandemic. Through it all, your support messages, the community we've built, and your loyalty have kept this show going. Every story told is made possible because of listeners like you, and here's to many more tales, strange, dark, and true, that lie ahead. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my cold, dead heart for filling your ears with Dark Poutine.
That's great. And just think of all the amazing people we've met. Like I've been about half time on this show. Four of those years.
Mm-hmm.
We were just saying, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
4 years.
I am so blown away that I've gotten to do this for this long, and I am so grateful. I am just so grateful. Thank you, folks.
Thank you for being weirdos who listen to us.
Right?
Because, you have taste.
Yeah, weirdos with taste. Oh, well.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
When most Canadians think of occult-related witch trials, their minds drift south to Salem, Massachusetts, or across the ocean to medieval Europe. The popular narrative suggests that Canada, with its reputation for tolerance and peace, remained untouched by the supernatural hysteria that gripped other nations. This perception, deeply embedded in the Canadian consciousness, paints our country as somehow above the dark chapters of witch hunting that stained other societies. Even Dark Poutine listeners, well-versed in the country's hidden crimes and forgotten tragedies, might be surprised to learn the truth. The reality is far different from this comfortable myth. Canada has a complex and largely forgotten history of witchcraft accusations, trials, and legal persecution spanning over 350 years, from the earliest days of New France to as recently as 2018. From demonic possessions in Quebec City to fraudulent psychics in modern Ontario, the Canadian witch trial story is one of fear, prejudice, and the persistent human tendency to blame the margins of society for inexplicable troubles. You are listening to Dark Poutine, Episode 390, Halloween 2025, a brief history of witch trials in Canada. In the autumn of 1660, Quebec City was a settlement of under 800 people, clinging to the edge of the New World, hounded by threats both real and supernatural. That year, anxiety simmered in the colony as eerie phenomena unsettled its residents. The Jesuit Relations for 1660 to 1661 recount settlers' dread after a winter earthquake in Montreal, which was seen as a bad omen. Quote, "The lamenting voices that were heard in the air over Trois-Rivières might have been the echo of the poor captives carried away by the Iroquois, and the canoes that seemed to be flying in the air all on fire around Quebec were only a feeble presage of the enemy's canoes." End quote. Marie de l'Incarnation, an Ursuline nun, shared similar stories with others, mentioning, quote, "disturbing voices heard in the air and a fiery canoe in the sky, as well as other strange occurrences. These events," she noted, "were soon followed by something even stranger. Quote, it was discovered that there are sorcerers and magicians in this country." End quote.
They made their way over from the old land.
With every person who immigrates come their folklore.
I find it interesting how when disaster strike, you know, earthquakes or sickness or strange lights, we as humans instinctively search for some sort of agency behind it, right?
Right.
And I think it feels safer to imagine an enemy than face a world that might just be completely indifferent to us. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's the reality of the world. This planet is totally indifferent to us.
Yep.
You know,
it could have a big old sneeze and we'd all be gone.
You know, and I think in a small, fragile colony, like every unexplained event became sort of a threat to social order. And earthquakes and fiery skies weren't just natural forces; there were warnings that unseen powers were at work. Right?
Yep.
And calling them sorcery gave shape to the fear. You know, it kind of turns the randomness of misfortune into something human and intentional and therefore possible to confront. Right. I think it was a way of people to figuring out how they can feel in control.
It's a coping mechanism, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Into this charged atmosphere arrived Barbe Hallet, a 16-year-old French servant, and Daniel Vuille, a miller, who had seemingly converted from Protestantism to Catholicism during the ship's Atlantic crossing. Marie de l'Incarnation wrote that Vuille had tried and failed to seduce Hallet. After they arrived in New France, Hallet found work as a servant in a Beauport Manor house, while Vuille established himself as a miller nearby. In December 1660, the household where Hallet worked was racked by inexplicable disturbances. Jesuit missionary Paul Ragueneau described the chaos. Quote, "The girl's home was so infested that stones were flying from all sides, thrown by invisible hands, hurting no one, though they flew through 20 persons or so, with a noise and a force as great as if they had been launched by a mighty arm." End quote. Barbe Hallet herself soon became the locus of a chilling ordeal. She reported terrifying visions of demons appearing as men, women, children, and beasts, hallucinations visible only to her. At times, these entities, quote, "spoke through her mouth without seemingly using the possessed girl's voice," Ragueneau wrote. Her body convulsed in fits, and she swung between violent outbursts and limp exhaustion. Those who witnessed her suffering believed they were watching a genuine case of demonic possession. The strangeness of her symptoms and their persistence forced the matter from whispered gossip to urgent concern within the colony.
That would be urgent concern.
Right.
Yeah, I love stories of like possession narratives.
Yep.
And they work because they turn private suffering into public drama. Right? Mm-hmm. It's somebody's sick, right? But it becomes this public drama. And I think her body carried the colony's fears, didn't it? She became the stage where everyone could see, evil being made tangible. It's a whole thing of like, we have to be able to know what's happening in life. So therefore, right?
While we did Supernatural Circumstances, Morgan and I talked to the author of a book called The Right, which was also a movie with Anthony Hopkins in it.
Oh, yeah.
In that conversation, we learned that this author had been involved in modern-day exorcisms at the Vatican. He had witnessed them.
Interesting.
And how they were a part of psychiatric treatment to people to have an exorcism. It was really, really a fascinating conversation and concept. The author's name is Matt Baglio, so look at Supernatural Circumstances for that episode, or look up his book, The Right.
I think it's interesting, if somebody believes in demons but has a mental health issue, and it's almost a placebo of like, we've done the exorcist. Oh, great, it's out of me now. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
We like our minds, conscious, subconscious, and superconscious, are very powerful entities in and of themselves. So addressing somebody's difficulty through their belief is probably a really great way to go, really.
Yeah. It's whatever works.
Exactly. As long as nobody's getting hurt, we're good. Halé's employers first moved her to another home. When that failed to stop the disturbances, the local priest attempted an exorcism, which was unsuccessful. Eventually, the case reached Bishop François de Laval, one of New France's most respected religious authorities. He personally intervened, overseeing another round of prayers and rituals, but the mysterious forces plaguing Halé held fast. At this point, both the church and the colonial government faced an impasse. The supernatural had invaded their world, and the old tools failed to root it out. Bishop Laval chose to remove Barbe to the Hôtel Dieu de Québec, the colony's main hospital, which was run by a community of nuns. Here, she came under the care of Catherine de Saint-Augustin, one of the most admired women in the colony and someone who, by her own admission, was no stranger to the wrath of evil spirits. As Ragueneau put it, Saint-Augustin had already been obsessed with the devil since the 1650s, finding herself subject to attacks and torments during her own prayer and service. Quote, "Sometimes they would shake her bed during the night. Other times they would act on her tongue or other parts of her body to keep her from praying aloud, confessing, receive communion, take holy water, or make the sign of the cross." End quote. The attempted exorcisms at the hospital became fraught, with Saint-Augustin reportedly drawing the focus of the entities plaguing Halé. The spirits, said to be enraged by her faith and resilience, inflicted bruises so severe upon Saint-Augustin's arm that it turned black from bruises. Still, the attacks on Barbe continued unabated, and the young woman remained at their mercy. Historian Paul-André Dubois notes that in early New France, such phenomena were not dismissed as mere superstition, but treated as pressing threats to the order and safety of entire communities.
Yeah, and I think these details, like the bruises, reinforce the reality of the threat. So, if even the most devout suffered visible attack, right, it kind of confirmed the danger and intensified the collective belief. And the story itself is binding people together through a shared fear. Right. It's sort of it's a community. It really is a community thing.
It absolutely is. Yeah. At the same time, the authorities began searching for the instigator of Halé's torment. The pattern of the attacks, her visions, and conversations with the girl led leaders at every level to the same conclusion. Barbe's suffering had a human cause, one traceable to Daniel Vuil, her shipboard companion and rejected suitor. The The fact that Halle claimed to see Vuil in her visions was accepted as near proof of his guilt. Marie de l'Incarnation wrote sharply, Vuil, denied Halle's affection, had resolved to achieve his ends through the ruses of his diabolical art. It was believed that the injuries to Halle and disturbances at the manor reflected the effects of his magic. This interpretation may seem outlandish to modern ears, but in the context of 17th century colonial New France, the involvement of sorcery in unexplained tragedies was an ever-present suspicion. Yet Daniel Vuil's troubles reached further than witchcraft. Bishop Laval, confident that he had converted Vuil to Catholicism during the voyage, now learned that the miller had never quit Protestantism, making him a relapse or apostate, a capital offense then punishable by death. Moreover, Vuil was accused of another grave offense, selling liquor to local First Nations people. This was strictly forbidden by colonial edict and the bishop's particular crusade. Caught on multiple fronts, religious, legal, and supernatural, Vuil's fate was sealed. The official records of Vuil's prosecution have been lost or obscured, but most sources agree on the sequence of events. He was arrested and subjected to lengthy questioning. The evidence, such as it was, rested partly on supernatural testimony and partly on contemporary moral and legal outrage. On October 7, 1661, Daniel Vuil was publicly shot in Quebec City. The exact reason for the execution remains debated. Some argue he was put to death for selling alcohol to indigenous people, others for apostasy, and still others maintain that the witchcraft accusation tipped the balance. He was denied burial in a Catholic cemetery. His grave and the specific charges behind his death remain lost to time.
Yeah, and executions, were never and really are never just about punishing the guilty. They're intentional spectacles. People watch them happen, even today, right, in countries that do it. They're spectacles that reassure the community that chaos has been confronted, or what perception of chaos is being confronted.
That's what a trial is about. That's what a criminal trial is about.
Yeah, and killing this guy was less about him than about restoring order for everyone else, right?
Yep. Yeah. Halle's ordeal did not end with Vuil's execution. Despite the removal of her alleged tormentor, the young woman continued to suffer. In 1662, desperate for relief, Catherine de Saint Augustin devised an unusual solution. Barb was sewn into a bag, a strange remedy whose logic is opaque to modern sensibilities. The act, combined with prayers invoking the martyred Jesuit Jean de Brébeuf, led to what was regarded as a miraculous cure. Halle eventually recovered, left the convent, married, and lived until 1696. Her story, nonetheless, left an indelible mark on colonial memory. In retrospect, the case stands as one of only a handful of formal witchcraft prosecutions in Canadian history, a far cry from the mass witch hunts of New England, but telling in its own right. Unlike in Salem, where hundreds were swept up and 20 were executed, New France typically saw punishment for witchcraft as banishment, not death. Yet the example of Barb Halle and Daniel Vuil shows that under the proper pressure, fear and accusation were more than enough to end a life and plunge a colony into chaos. Jean Campagne's witch trial is among the best documented tales of sorcery in New France, a story that reveals as much about colonial anxieties as it does about the fate of one man. Born around 1640 in Angoulême, France, Campagne followed the path of many poor young men seeking promise in the colonies. In 1670, he arrived in Acadia, then a hard-edged patchwork world of French, Mi'kmaq, and Acadian families, traveling alongside Governor Hector Dondinier de Grandfontaine, who was charged with cementing France's claim to this contested territory.
Witchcraft accusations often appear in moments of stress. We've talked about this, linking sickness or famine to a single neighbor turns the suffering into a manageable story, right? One body can be punished, one person can be blamed.
Sure.
Right?
She's a witch. Throw her in the water and see if she floats.
Yeah, that'll solve our problems because we don't understand the reality of what's going on here because we don't have enough science yet, right?
Yep. Campania set down roots in the Beaubassin region, land that would one day straddle the modern border of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Life in these settlements was precarious. Disease, failed harvests, violence, and suspicion were woven into the fabric of daily existence. Here, Campania's reputation shifted from that of an ordinary settler to a social outcast and then to something more sinister. By the late 1670s, whispers grew. Campania was blamed for the township's misfortunes. Deaths of several men and domestic animals during the epidemic of 1678 were laid at his feet. When livestock sickened, tempers ran short, and blame followed ancient patterns. Campania was accused of having breathed in a man's eye and caused him to fall ill and die, an act of supernatural malice according to those who gave testimony. The accusations worsened. Some said Campania had cursed neighbors who offended him, wielding malevolent force with apparent ease. Marie-Madeleine Martin, whose word carried weight in the community, swore in court that he was responsible for her brother-in-law's death by mystical means. Rumors claimed that Campania's mere presence could blight crops or call sickness down on both man and beast. What set this case apart from so many whispered claims was the fury and persistence of Campania's accusers and the willingness of authorities to act. Governor Michel Leneuf de la Vallière ordered Campania's arrest in 1684. It did not happen quietly. For 9 months, Campania sat in a colonial jail while the case against him accumulated. Simon Pierre Denis, a local notable, was paid 100 livres to transport him, shackled and publicly disgraced, the grueling distance to Quebec City. There, Campania would stand before the Provost Court, the colony's highest secular authority. The spectacle echoed legendary witch trials across the Atlantic, but it unfolded on raw earth and in the uncertain half-light of the Acadian frontier. The court in Quebec faced competing pressures. On one hand, the gravity of the charge demanded attention. Witchcraft in French law was a capital offense. On the other hand, these colonial judges also brought Enlightenment skepticism. Wary of appeals to supernatural explanation, they listened to witnesses, including Marie-Madeleine Martin and others who recounted Campania's supposed curses. They noted accounts of epidemics, unexplained deaths, and the social chaos always ready to break out where accusations of sorcery took hold. But in the search for material proof, the judges found themselves empty-handed. No witnesses had seen Campania perform rites associated with black magic. There were no physical tokens or poppets like those described in New England cases. The most damning evidence remained hearsay and community gossip. Historian Paul-Émile Leblanc writes, "The Campania affair is notable for the incredible frailty of its evidence and the persistence of its accusers, showing how tenuous the line was between social scapegoating and judicial action in such cases. For Campania, the threat was deadly real. He faced weeks of interrogation, his fate hanging by a thread. Yet the world of New France, while brutal and suspicious, fell short of the witch-burning hysteria witnessed in Europe or colonial America." On June 28, 1685, Campania was acquitted. The court declared insufficient evidence to support the charge of sorcery or maleficia, despite the impassioned complaints of his neighbors.
That's my favorite flavor of ice cream.
Maleficia?
I'll have 2 scoops of maleficia, please.
Oh, boy. Maleficia has to be black. It really has to be like a deep gothic black.
Yeah, with
licorice flavored.
Yeah, what kind of nuts would be in it?
Maleficia would be pecans, for sure.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah.
Formal acquittal would never erase suspicion, right? Like, once somebody was named a witch, they would carry that mark forever.
Yeah.
Right? Accusation itself was the punishment. It doesn't matter that this person was sort of, no, she's not a witch. Well, yeah, everyone still think they are.
Yeah. As Matthew surmised, Campania's acquittal did not clear his name in the eyes of his community. He returned to Beaubassin, but the stain of suspicion never thoroughly washed away. Local oral tradition continued long after his trial to link him to tragedy and odd misfortune. In some stories he was referred to not as Jean Campagne, but as l'enchanteur, the enchanter or the sorcerer. The legacy of the case is split. Legally, it ended without execution or banishment. Culturally, it persisted for generations as a warning to those who drew too much attention and made enemies in close-knit societies. Jean Campagne's story shows how, even without bonfires or gallows, the fear of witchcraft could upend a whole community, turning daily sorrows into accusations and one man's name into local legend. While his acquittal spared him the death penalty, it could not restore the reputation he lost or the suspicions that haunted him after the trial. These early stories provide a window into frontier justice on the edges of New France, setting the stage for what was to come. After the break, we'll move from colonial suspicion to bizarre 19th century community rituals, seances gone wrong, and the strange legal twists that kept witchcraft on Canada's books until very recently. Stay tuned for tales of heated horseshoes, fortune tellers on trial, and the modern women who became the last witches prosecuted in Canada. And we are at the halfway point, Matthew. What are your thoughts so far?
I really like this episode, going back
fun.
in time like this. It is fun. You know, witchcraft accusations aren't about magic. They're about managing fear. We've talked about that. And, you know, when harvests fail or sickness spreads or disaster strikes, people can't bear the thought that no one is in control. And that's what it gets down to. So they create these stories to put on the human face on the chaos, and naming a witch turns randomness into conflict, and conflict feels solvable, doesn't it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're having a conflict, you're trying to get to an end point.
Right.
Right? And that's why witch trials keep resurfacing across time and culture, right?
Satanic panic.
Yeah, they channel anxiety into a ritual process of accusation, trial, punishment. And it doesn't matter if the evidence is thin, right? We've seen like satanic panic, right? What matters is the performance of order. Mm-hmm. And it's not just history. Today we see that same pattern in witch hunts online and conspiracy theories and moral panics. You know, fear searches for a target. It always does. And every society builds containers for its fear and aggression. In New France, it was exorcisms and executions. In the Maritime, it was folk rituals and horseshoes. Right? Yeah. And today, it's viral outrage. Right? And, you know, the costumes change, but the function's the same, Mike. To take uncertainty and pin it on someone we can confront.
Yeah, definitely. In the early 1800s, rural New Brunswick remained fertile ground for folk belief and suspicion, even as Enlightenment ideas spread elsewhere. The stretch of settlements along Long Reach saw a pair of witchcraft scares now remembered as the Kimball and Tennant cases. Though these were not formal court trials, the anxieties that drove them mirrored much older European patterns. The 1816 incident centered on a woman known as Pole Kimball living at Long Reach. Tensions had risen following a wave of personal misfortune and unexplained illness in the area. In the words of local neighbor Benjamin Crawford, the rumor mill turned quickly. Pole Kimball is said to be bewitched, he recorded in a family diary. This wasn't the only mention. Another local, William Old Bailey, took it on himself to head over to the Kimball house on a mission. The plan was blunt and accurate to the spirit of the times. Old Bailey at Bill Kimball's to kill the witches. The purpose wasn't to harm anyone, but rather to perform folk rituals intended to rid the homestead of evil. In these rural communities, the lines between superstition and practice blurred. Events like failing crops, sick animals, or mysterious ailments had supernatural explanations just as real as the day's news. The emotional waves of the Great Awakening reinforced these beliefs. This religious revival swept through the Maritimes and gave new energy not only to faith, but to the idea that unseen forces govern daily life. 2 years later, in 1818, a similar episode unraveled along the same stretch. This time, the focus was on Mary Tennant, a long-settled widow at Tennant's Cove, just downriver. Rumors spread that Tennant was the cause of odd goings-on around the Reach. Strange illnesses and bad luck tracked to her door without a material cause. In an echo of the Kimball scare, a group of locals convened a community ritual. The neighbors gathered at her home, holding hands in a circle while a horseshoe was heated to red hot in a fireplace. The horseshoe, a traditional countercharm in both British and Acadian folklore, was meant to drive away the witch, a way to break either a hex or a curse with fire and communal prayer.
You know how color codes, like you have like CMYK or you have Pantone numbers, but digital ones they call hex codes, and I've always laughed. Like it's like, ooh, it's witchcraft on the screen. I have a hex code.
Yeah,
I think what's obvious here, Mike, you see this again and again and again, is older, isolated women were the common targets.
Right.
And, witchcraft accusations, they act like social discipline. All they do is punish those who don't fit neatly into the expectations of family or community. And those are the women that were targeted.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the witches that were burned were lesbians.
That was a trend as well.
Just even if they didn't know they were, just women that's not fitting into typical family structures, etc.
Yep. Not everyone believed the worst about Mary Tennant. Abigail Barter, who lived with her and whose 6 young children shared the old woman's house, defended Tennant against her accusers. Her actions show that belief in supernatural harm rarely went unchallenged, even in tight-knit places. Still, the persistence of these accusations shows how fear, frustration, and community tension could quickly turn to scapegoating, especially toward older, isolated women who often had the least power to defend themselves. No records suggest violence or official charges resulted from these events, but their memory lingered. The Kimball and Tennant cases were shaped as much by religious fervor and imported superstition as by isolation and local loss. These stories remain part of New Brunswick folk memory, reminders of how communal fears toward witches could surge at any moment when fate dealt a bad hand. Indigenous and European worldviews around witchcraft and what became Canada reveal sharp contrasts, but also points of cultural exchange and misunderstanding. For many Indigenous nations, practices Europeans labeled witchcraft or sorcery were often an accepted part of spiritual and social life. Historical records show that while some charged with witchcraft faced execution, forgiveness was possible if the accused sincerely renounced such actions and vowed to change. The Cree and other nations practiced the shaking tent ceremony, a complex shamanic ritual intended to communicate with spirits and seek guidance, healing, or the location of missing people. According to Cree elder Charles Chizo in a CBC News article, the significance of the shaking tent was deeply practical and spiritual. Former Grand Chief Matthew Mukosh described its historical double edge. People used it long ago to find out about things. When a person lived off hunting, they'd use it to look for game. Also, when a person was sick, it would tell what needs to be used to get healed. But people would use it in a negative way. They would kill each other. It was like that everywhere. The ceremony combined healing, divination, social regulation, and, sometimes, community tension. Participants might hear spirits speak, witness the tent physically shake, or watch the shaman escape bonds, all interpreted as evidence of spirit intervention.
Yeah, and I think for many Indigenous nations, these practices weren't witchcraft.
100%.
They're a part of spiritual and social life, right? But Europeans collapsed them into categories of evil because they couldn't see beyond their own framework. So they turned this cultural difference into accusation as part of the entire structure of getting rid of those cultures, right? The European settlers, tried to, breed the Indian out of the Indian is the sort of shit they used to say, right? In residential schools, it was about trying to get rid of their culture completely. This is just part of it.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because that's exactly where I'm going. European colonists, accustomed to associating witches with evil, often interpreted these indigenous practices as diabolical. The famous Jesuit missionary Father Paul Lejeune described New France in 1632 as nothing short of Satan's empire because of the strength of indigenous spiritual belief and ritual. Shamans, critical spiritual figures, were painted as wizards, witches, or agents of the devil by colonial chroniclers. Protestant New Englanders feared indigenous people were allies of the devil, a belief that underpinned prejudice and justified persecution. Acadian, French, and English folklore reflected this ambivalence and suspicion. Catherine Jolicoeur, a dedicated folklorist in 20th century New Brunswick, collected 400 stories from Acadian tradition relating to indigenous people and found that 350 involved the Mi'kmaq possessing the power to hex or witch people or animals. In most stories, Mi'kmaq visitors would stop at homes to trade or ask for food, and it was advisable to never disappoint their Mi'kmaq visitors, for they would surely cast a malevolent spell in reprisal. Some stories told of knowledge exchanged, Mi'kmaq women teaching Acadian children folk healing, or, as one informant put it, the secret of witchcraft, le secret du sorcelage.
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 Sorcelage. This folklore reveals how communities negotiated their tensions, right? A healer could be revered in one story, but feared in another story, right? And tales of witches, sort of tracked social boundaries. Who is trusted, who is dangerous, who can be blamed.
Yep.
The truth is, most people that were considered witches back then are probably the ones that I'd be friends with.
Me too. Me too. Interdependence and shared devotion could blur the lines between religion and witchcraft. Mi'kmaq and Acadians honored St. Anne as a grandmotherly protector and healer, a figure blending local ancestor spirit devotion with Catholic tradition. Denise Lamontagne wrote that this helped explain why some Acadian communities did not go so far in their condemnation of native witches as did Anglophones. Even so, mistrust and the marking of indigenous women, especially those who were elderly, poor, or lived outside settler networks, as sources of malice remained a persistent theme. Meanwhile, Acadian belief merged European and indigenous concepts over time. Stories about Tawai, Mi'kmaq women believed to be especially powerful sorcerers, reveal a fusion of imported and local folklore. Both Mi'kmaq and Acadian traditions emphasize social reciprocity. Offending someone could result in supernatural reprisal, whether in the form of a hex, bad luck, or illness. The legend of Mi'kmaq sorcery then became a kind of social regulation, a warning against selfishness and broken agreements. The Protestant Anglophone Maritimes, by comparison, tended to single out women in these narratives. English-language tales viewed the witch as almost always female and morally subversive, while French and Mi'kmaq accounts featured male and female practitioners more evenly. Where English Protestant culture stressed the danger of witches as a threat to the community's moral order, Acadian and Mi'kmaq stories gave witches roles that reflected social fault lines, outsiders, the poor, or those who broke codes of generosity and mutual aid. This collision of beliefs shaped daily interaction, suspicion, and even legal response in shared territories. European courts, seeing witchcraft solely as a criminal or diabolical act, failed to comprehend its complex embedded meaning in indigenous societies. Accusations could reflect genuine grievances or anxieties about change, resource competition, and social cohesion in both traditions, but European-style prosecution imposed a much narrower perspective. These cultural clashes didn't just breed misunderstanding, they shaped the way laws were written, interpreted, and enforced. While indigenous traditions threaded supernatural power through daily life and community relationships, colonial law reduced such power to a crime fixated on punishment and proof. The courtroom became another arena where worldviews collided, and all too often the indigenous context was ignored entirely. Out of this tangle of anxieties, suspicions, and attempts at legal control emerged frameworks like Section 365 of Canada's Criminal Code, a direct product of Enlightenment-era reason aimed not at rooting out evil, but at regulating claims of supernatural power for profit. Section 365 of Canada's Criminal Code stands as one of the country's most peculiar relics, an artifact of Enlightenment thinking that quietly shaped how Canadians' courts and police approached claims of magic and the supernatural for well over a century. Its wording is direct. Everyone who fraudulently, A, pretends to exercise or to use any kind of witchcraft, sorcery, enchantment, or conjuration, B, undertakes for a consideration to tell fortunes, or C, pretends from his skill in or knowledge of an occult or crafty science to discover where or in what manner anything that is supposed to have been stolen or lost may be found, is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. While the words call to mind medieval laws, Section 365 isn't about witches with supernatural powers, but about protecting the public from scams and con artists using occult claims as a cover. The grifters, Matthew, my favorite topic.
Right? Do you like that movie?
I've never seen it.
Okay.
I probably should.
Yeah, so now, at this point then, witchcraft isn't being prosecuted as supernatural crime, but as fraud, right? So that's
the people who are claiming witchcraft and using it as a subterfuge to rip people off.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a very subtle difference. It's not saying don't practice witchcraft, just don't rip people off doing it.
That law starts to address less danger of demons and more the danger of being ripped off and deceived, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
The origins of Section 365 go back to the British Witchcraft Act of 1735, a law that was a turning point in the Western approach to witchcraft. Rather than allowing for the hunting or execution of so-called witches, the British Parliament took a more skeptical, even modern tack. The new statute assumed that witches and magic were not real. Anyone claiming powers over the supernatural or promising results by sorcery was really a fraudster, preying on fear or grief for profit. Historian Owen Davies writes, "The new law meant that witchcraft was no longer to be considered a criminal act, but rather an offense against the country's newly enlightened state." This modern perspective led prosecutors and courts to treat magical claims as a matter of public fraud rather than a threat to church or state religion. Canada inherited these statutes. Section 365 was enshrined in the country's first national criminal code in 1892 and remained essentially unchanged for generations. The only notable update came in the 1950s, when legislators added the word fraudulently to emphasize intent and to shield religions, spiritual practitioners, or healers acting in good faith. The focus always was on protecting people from being bilked, not on persecuting genuine spiritual faith or traditional healing. In practice, charges under Section 365 nearly always targeted fortune tellers, psychics, and spiritualists whom police or prosecutors suspected of running scams. Legal historian Stephen Coughlin explains, "The law was used in Canada not because we believed in witches, but because authorities believed people could be taken advantage of by those who claim special supernatural help to solve a problem or bring back a lost lover. The law never criminalized belief in magic or participation in rituals. It was designed to intervene in commercial activities or deliberate deception for profit." By the 2000s, Section 365 was increasingly viewed as an anachronism, a so-called zombie law, still on the books, but rooted in a world that had changed. When Parliament passed Bill C-51 in December 2018, lawmakers repealed Section 365, along with other outdated statutes, such as the ban on duels and blasphemous libel, arguing that consumer protection and general fraud laws were already sufficient to address actual crimes. The final penalty under Section 365 was up to 6 months' imprisonment or a $2,000 fine, rarely enforced in the 21st century, but still available for police seeking to address psychic or fortune-telling fraud.
The fact that this law lingered well into the 21st century shows how durable old fears are.
Yeah.
Right? And even in a modern country, the state kept a statute ready to police claims of supernatural power, right?
I looked into a lot of cases mentioning witchcraft. There are people from a lot of other cultures that have come here, and then in the courts, when they're struggling with somebody over something, they're mentioning witchcraft as a part of the reason that they're having the trouble with these people. It's really, really fascinating reading.
Wow.
Yeah. But usually, because it's such a contentious topic, they don't name the people. They're just named X.
Right.
It's the person's belief, and they don't want to have a conversation about that person's belief and call them out for having a belief that goes against our cultural norms.
Interesting.
Yeah, it shows a certain sensitivity in Canadian law, which is very interesting to me, for sure. Ironically, the last year of Section 365's existence saw it invoked in 3 now notorious modern cases. 2 Ontario women, Dory Medina Stevenson and Samantha Stevenson, unrelated, were charged just weeks before the law was repealed, and both instances captured headlines worldwide. Dory Stevenson ran a business called Milton Psychic and was arrested by Halton Regional Police on October 18, 2018. The police claimed she had defrauded victims of at least $60,000 by manipulating victims into believing something bad will happen to them unless they remit cash. Detective Sergeant Costantini described the tactics. We even see incidents where victims are required to make purchases and remit these purchases in order to be cleansed. Purchased items include new cell phones, jewelry, appliances, and gift cards, under the assumption these items will be returned, but they never are. Hot on the heels of the Milton case was that of Samantha Stevenson of Toronto, charged on October 25, 2018. Using the alias Ivana Lopez, she allegedly convinced a 67-year-old man to sell his home, transfer $600,000 in proceeds to her account, and then continue providing payments under the pretense of expelling evil spirits. According to police, she convinced him that to rid himself of evil spirits in his home, he had to sell the house and transfer the money to her account, where she would hold it until the spirits were removed. The victim also sold his car and maxed out credit cards to cover additional spiritual charges. These investigations made international headlines. The York Regional Police stressed to reporters that Section 365 had nothing to do with religion. The offense specifically deals with individuals who fraudulently portray themselves as having fortune-telling abilities or pretend to use witchcraft, sorcery, enchantment, or conjuration in order to obtain money or valuables from a victim. This charge is not connected in any way to any religion. The third and final case occurred in Timmins, Ontario, and became infamous for its timing. On December 11, 2018, just 2 days before Section 365 was repealed, police charged Tiffany Butch, who went by the nickname White Witch of the North, with pretending to practice witchcraft. Police claimed she demanded cash from a client in exchange for her mystical services, warning of a dreadful event if payment wasn't made. Timmins police spokesperson Mark DePatia told CBC, in this particular set of circumstances, the person gave them a sense of foreboding that a dreadful thing was about to happen to their family at some point, that they should provide them with financial compensation so they could perform some sort of mystical service that would prevent that from happening. Butch, who denies the charges and insists her work was genuine psychic practice, pointed out, People here have called me a witch and assigned me a nickname, but I am not a witch. I am a psychic. With the repeal of Section 365 on December 13th, 2018, these became the last known charges of their kind in Canada, marking the closure of a legal era that began in the shadow of Enlightenment skepticism and ended as part of a modern review of outdated statutes. Bill C-51 and related reforms aim to remove laws that were obsolete or redundant or had already been found unconstitutional. In the words of Dalhousie law professor Stephen Coughlin, cleaning out such provisions is a useful but modest step, ending criminal penalties for an era when fear of the witch had become just another tool for policing fraud and public morality.
Public morality. I love that term. Witchcraft is gone from the law books, Mike, but not from human behavior.
No.
Right? We still create scapegoats. We still fear manipulation. We still long for someone to blame when life feels out of control. The form's changed in the way we do this, but the instinct hasn't.
Good words to end on. Thank you, my friend. And that is it for Dark Poutine episode 390, Halloween 2025, a brief history of witch trials in Canada. 8 years, folks. Wow. Thank you. Voicemails next.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Yeah. All right, let's start with okay, so we're going to do some voicemails for our anniversary episode here. People just wishing us a happy birthday and all that kind of stuff. So we got a few, and let's carry on.
Hi, Mike and Matt. I called because I was always curious why everyone laughs at your voicemail. Very cute. I'm Steph from Montreal, by the way. I started listening at the start of summer at the advice of my mother. Hi, Mummykins. I started at the beginning. Now I'm at episode 221. I watch true crime shows so much that it kind of worries my hubby. You mentioned Joe Kenda before. I freaking love Joe Kenda. Anyways, keep up the good work, guys. I guess I'll find out in 100+ episodes if you air this or not. Or Mummykins will tell me. So go make a boom boom in your bonnet and bye.
There you go.
Boom, boom,
Make a boom
the
boom.
bonnet.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much. So Steph from Montreal, what do you think Steph does there in Montreal, Matthew?
I think she runs a nightclub.
A nightclub?
Yeah.
Okay. A nightclub. That sounds fun.
Yeah, she's a nightclub promoter.
So what is it? Just like, what's the name of the nightclub, Matthew? It's got to have a
Stereo.
Fun. What's that?
Stereo.
Stereo. A nightclub called Stereo. Oh, very interesting. That's a word you don't hear very much anymore, which is interesting.
Why?
We were always concerned about stereo. Now it's surround sound.
There is actually a stereo nightclub in Montreal.
There you go.
I've had some fun there.
Some fun.
Yeah.
All righty. Here's our next voicemail. It's from a Yumber Yarder.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. This is Sammy from the Yumber Yard. You might remember me from such posts as I recently posted my engagement. Sorry, I'm very nervous. I'm from Ontario. I've been listening to you guys for 4 or 5 years now. So I haven't been there since the beginning, but you guys were one of the first podcasts that I ever started listening to. In fact, I started listening to you guys because I started listening to American podcasts and I really wanted some Canadian content. So I found you and I was like, yes, Canadian content. So awesome. Thank you so much for creating your podcast. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I just wanted to say thank you for existing and happy birthday, Dark Poutine. And I'm so happy that you guys are in my life. So thank you so much. And shout out to the Yumber Yarders because you guys are the best people on Facebook and social media and probably in the world. So have a good day, guys, and happy birthday and happy Halloween. And I wish you all the best. And hopefully I'll have the courage to call back another time. Take care. Bye-bye.
You see that? She's nervous, but she sounds awesome, and I'm glad she called in. So Sammy's a regular in the Yumber Yard. I'm so happy they got engaged. I'm looking at pictures of the happy couple right now, and they look like they're a damn good match to me.
Yeah. Congrats, Sammy.
Congrats, Sammy.
Partner. What do you think Sammy does for a living, Matthew?
What does she do for a living? I think she runs a lodge.
A lodge? Like a fishing lodge or hunting lodge?
No, just like an arts lodge.
Like a getaway lodge for artists.
Yeah, she doesn't do any of the animals killings. So so she runs this cool sort of artist lodge.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, noble work, Sammy. We appreciate that
I would love to. You know what? I'd love to go to a lodge right now.
Yeah, I would love to live in a lodge
for for a month.
Wow.
Yeah. Just with books, with no technology, just me, lodge, Steve. Justin can visit on weekends, and just read and hang out with my dog.
There you go. I think that's a great. Just a good visit on weekends.
Sometimes, after 21 years, every once in a while, you just want a little bit of self-time.
Just a break. Just a little tiny break. All right. And lastly, but not leastly.
You, my friend. I love you, my friend, Mike.
Aw, I appreciate that.
No, we're recording this, so we may or may not be recording this on Thanksgiving weekend. And
right.
When I thought of things I was thankful for, you were one of them.
Oh, well, you're always something that I'm grateful for, too. That's why my post on Facebook was so sort of general. It was like, I am grateful for you because I am grateful for everybody who's in my life. I am grateful for every single person who is in my life. And you are one of them.
I'm grateful for, the first thing I was grateful for this year is being alive, because it's been a rough year. And if I wasn't alive, then I couldn't be grateful for anything else, could I?
No. No, definitely not. Definitely not. All right. So our last voicemail is from somebody who we know well, and it's Jen Hesse.
Jen!
Hey, this is Jen in Washington, but I'm in the airport heading to Florida because I couldn't resist seeing Gowan in the States. I am who I am. Anyway, I just wanted to call and say happy 8th birthday. Enjoy the show so much. Can't stop listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful birthday. Go shit in your hat.
There you go. Well, thanks, Jen.
Of course she's in an airport. Jen is always on the go. She's, as my mother would say, she's got ants in her pants.
She really does. Jen is unable to sit still for a number of reasons. And it's just, oh my goodness, ants in her pants is a very good description. And leftovers. Loves leftovers.
I don't think she's a fan. I think she's in a long-term relationship with strange animal. Right?
It's true. It's true. And cosmetics as well. I like the song Cosmetics. But thank you, Jen. We know Jen's an educator. And
she is an educator.
German speaking. So let's talk about hobbies for Jen. What do you think she does with her spare time?
Well, first of all, she goes to every Gowan concert that ever
There is that.
And I think her hobbies is like waiting in airports. And I have to say something about to Jen. She did a little review of a hotel that's at an airport.
Yes.
And I wanted to say, Jen, do you not know that hotels at airports are just holding tanks?
It's pretty much what they are. Yeah.
If somebody's staying in a hotel in an airport, it's because they have to. So they don't have to try. So my advice to her is, don't stay at the hotel airport.
No, even though it's closer. I mean, that's what I stay there because it's closer.
Hotels at airports are soulless. completely and utterly soulless.
They're like an aquarium for airline passengers with
They're
the little
this
diver.
They're this weird liminal space, aren't they?
Yeah, they're strange.
You're neither here nor there, and you're just wandering around naked in the hallways.
Well, that's the old days, Matthew. That's not right now.
Have you ever been locked out of a hotel room naked by accident? Okay, I wasn't naked. I had a towel around me, and I thought I'd run to get ice and forgot my keys.
Oh, no.
So I had to go down to the lobby because there's no phone on the floor, in a towel, and ask for a key.
Oh, dear. The most fun experience I've ever had at a hotel was the one with Carol that we stayed in Seattle. It was like a Motel 6 or something like that. It was terrible. It was terrible. The walls were thin. It was cold. All the things that you can imagine that are terrible, including someone walking by the door and farting loudly. And Carol thought it was me. It was like somebody farted in the hall so loud that she thought it was me.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So we do have an email that someone sent us, and her name is Sue Rogers, and she says, hat shitting to ensue. Listen, boys, I love you. I'm an ultra runner, so spend hours upon hours in the woods running. A good chunk of those hours are dark. What does one listen to when running in the dark by the hour? Dark Poutine, of course.
Poutine.
Nothing helps keep the pace high and the heart rate steady than hearing Matthew calmly speaking up in his wonderfully annoyed tone and Mike steadily continuing with the tale while talking out loud to you both in the dark woods on my own, surrounded by PEI wildlife threats like hungry squirrels and the odd menacing skunk.
Ugh.
Thank you for the hours of endless entertainment. I pass certain areas and remember specific parts of the podcast I listen to in that area, and it will always make me want a double-double. Congrats on the anniversary. Don't be a traitor, and keep them coming. Don't be a traitor. Okay.
That's
because I was on Traitors.
Because you were on the show.
Yeah,
you know,
Sue
it's really
from PEI.
funny. It's really funny that you say that. Like, I used to go for walks and listen to audiobooks and stuff like that. And to this day, sometimes when I'm at a certain spot on a walk, I remember a part of the book. Mm-hmm. The brain does something strange. But also, Ultra Runner, oh my gosh. Like, I wish I could pay people to run for me and I'd get the physical benefits.
Right.
There'd be like millions of people in China running on treadmills to keep everyone thin in North America.
Oh dear.
That's a dystopian. I'm going to write that story. That's quite dystopian, isn't it?
Definitely. It's like a really weird version of a picture of Dorian Gray.
There's tariffs on the runners.
Yeah.
If you lose 10 pounds, you have to pay a tariff.
Oh dear. And Sue also says, check out my father's book, Frederick Ben Rogers, born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, author of Lily and Me, a great book and a great read. Order online at Amazon. So there you go, Lily and Me. I will have to check that out.
Lily and Me.
Yeah, that sounds fun. So yeah, I'm going to go to Amazon and look up Lily and Me. It's Lily with one L. So there you go. Thank you to everybody who took the time to wish us a happy birthday, and we'll be playing more voicemails over the ensuing weeks, I'm sure. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. So we do have a Donut Money donor this week, and this person's name is Alexandra Perus. And Alexandra and Alex, that's what I'm going to call him. He says, for an all-round amazing show, here is some donut money. Alexandra Perus. I do believe that person is French, Perusse, and Alexandra with a DRE and not a DER. So what do you think? Where do you think Alexandra lives?
South Africa.
He lives in South Africa. Okay.
'Cause the other Bruce I know is actually South African.
Bruce?
Yep.
Interesting. So what does Alexandra do in South Africa, Matthew?
Pearl diver.
A pearl diver in South... I didn't know there were such a thing.
Pearl
I guess.
divers.
Well, sure. No, I know there's pearl divers. I just didn't know that they were in South Africa as well. I usually associate that with somewhere in Asia.
I might have made that up.
You might have.
Yeah.
Not shocked. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for 8 years, folks. We love you.